Shedeur, we talk oftentimes about quarterback being the most important position in the sport. We obviously spent a lot of time with Shedeur throughout the process. He's highly accurate, can play well from the pocket, very productive college career. And, we felt like it wasn't necessarily the plan going into the weekend to select two quarterbacks, but as we talk about, we do believe in best player available. We do believe in positional value, and we didn't necessarily expect him to be available in the fifth round, and so we love adding competition to every position room and adding him to compete with the guys that are already in there. We felt like that was the appropriate thing to do. Yeah, I just say the biggest thing for us, we live by our board. We felt like he was a good, solid prospect at the most important position. We felt like it got to a point where he was probably mispriced, relative to the draft. Really the acquisition cost was pretty light, and it's a guy that we think can outproduce his draft slot. So I wouldn't say it's any more than that. Mary Kay, I think obviously Shedeur has kind of grown up in the spotlight, but our expectation is for him to come in here and work and compete. Nothing's been promised. Nothing will be given. So I may hesitate to characterize it as a blockbuster. That's not necessarily how we thought of the transaction, but we are excited to work with him. I think our message to him, it's really to all this. It's like, look, got to come in and work, and you got to come in and compete. That's the message. Nothing's given. Given the nature of the weekend for him, relative to, let's say, external expectation versus what happened, we did tell him that it really doesn't matter where you picked; it's what you do from that point forward. Because that's the reality for all the guys that we selected this weekend. In terms of his reaction, I just say it was probably a mixture of gratitude, relief, and determination. That would probably be the best way to characterize it.